flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we will move to approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the Tuesday, September 4th, 2018 Board of Education Study Session agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Alina. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Charles, and let's vote. Okay, and that passes. That's a good start. And we did not have any public comments this evening, so we will move past that to informational reports, and it looks like Dr. John Jungman. That's what it says.
There you go. So we will ask Ms. Becky to come. Where is Becky? There she is. To
Oh,
come
it's
to the
getting
podium.
better all the
Yes.
time. We have
a
Becky
special
Bowles.
guest here to come to the podium.
Yay.
Let us with an update.
Top of the show.
You're get started early.
Excellent.
So
Welcome.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
What I'm going to do is read what I wrote for you because I tend to ramble or go fast.
But don't go too fast.
Anyway, you know, PTA is such a big subject anyway. Well, and it's interesting to some people and a laugh to others, but, you know, they'll get over it. But I want to say good evening, and thank you for setting aside time in your agenda for a Springfield Council PTA report. I value our partnership and appreciate all the exposure you are giving PTA in our school district. Thank you, Mr. Hall. I see PTA as an immortal entity, actually. First roots were planted 121 years ago in Washington, D.C., and in Missouri 106 years ago. Then, even before Missouri PTA was organized, I know you've heard this story. It was in 1909 at Boyd School, Mother's Circle began. And 4 years later, in 1913, the Mother's Circles from Bowerman, Campbell, Fairbanks, and Phelps joined with Boyd and became the National Congress of Mothers and Parent-Teacher Associations of Springfield, Missouri, under the Missouri PTA organization. We've since dropped the mothers part. Got that, okay. Focuses have changed in our community over the decades. We have clean water in our schools and hot lunches, thanks to those moms. Did you guys know it was PTA that got the hot lunches rolling? Mm-hmm. And we have children required to attend school now instead of being sent to factories to work, thanks to those moms who fought to end child labor. In 1924, here in Springfield, parents solicited for state hygiene and physical education programs in our schools, and they organized a safety council to combat auto speeding on our streets. They requested, in 1924, homemaking and music be added to our school curriculums, and they started providing funds for children to have books. The list of things now incorporated in our programs and curriculum that started with a PTA parent's passion to improve the education of children in our community is a pretty cool list to read. Now, 109 years later, we still have parents passionate about public education and volunteer by the buckloads of hours with a joyful heart to boot.
Technical term?
Yes.
Technical term.
Yeah,
Okay.
technical, bucket loads. We currently have 47 of our schools with an active PTA or a PTSA unit. Our membership is just over 4,000, down from what it used to be at 12,000. So you're going to help me kind of get that up, right? My goal this year is to bring awareness to our community that PTA is alive and well at 109 years old, still serving our teachers and students and encouraging parents to be involved in our schools. You recently heard a wonderful report about the PTA Clothing Bank. It is a wonderful resource for many of our students and a fun place to volunteer for those who like to give back with their time since 1975 in our PTA. We also partner with SPS on sending our fourth graders to the Springfield Little Theater every year for an exciting theatrical performance. We still do the book fairs and distribution of books through Reading is Fun, the RIF program. We offer financial scholarships to a graduating senior from each high school. And if you have a high schooler, tell them to apply with their counselor. We also partner with the traffic division here in Springfield to ensure sidewalk safety for our walkers to school. Advocacy is the foundation of PTA, and our volunteers work tirelessly on legislative issues on the state and federal levels. So if you ever need any support on a topic, just make sure PTA's got it. With all of our serious hard work and efforts to make a difference in our world, we do stop from time to time and have fun and enjoy the children. Watch for the STEM events and the Reflection Showcase coming up in January at the Art Museum. We've partnered this year with the Art Museum, and I'm very excited about that. Attend any event at a school near you and celebrate the partnership of PTA and SPS. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much. Any questions, anyone?
And I look forward to those of you who are coming tomorrow. We're having our first meeting tomorrow morning at Wanda Gray. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we start around 9 o'clock, so hope you can be there.
Is it at 9? Yes. Very good. Thank you, Becky. Okay, so we will move on to preliminary contracts, agreements, and change orders.
Carol is not able to be with us tonight, so I'm covering a couple of agenda items, including this one. This is obviously first read. Its standard reports are provided. We have 15 agreements in that gap that we always are looking at, between 15,000 and less than 500,000. Some are capital projects, some are custodial components as we're getting school up and running. You have 2 weeks to review, as always, and then feel free to follow up with any questions, either to myself or Carol, and we'll be ready for consideration at the regular meeting. That's it on 4.01.
I got distracted by her cup. My husband
So it was a little
would
distracting.
object. Oh, my
I
word.
objected to, but she still brought it
Okay, thank you for that. Squirrel. We'll move on to board policy 5.01.
Yes, we do have a set of policies. As we told you, MSBA sent us the next update, and we have a portion of that ready for you to go. Each one of these has been through administrative review. No changes to the MSBA recommendations in these policies. Most of them align to either a legislative change or a legal precedent, or sometimes it's just some wording study that they've gotten feedback from districts that they would like updated. One of these is the annual, where it's required every other year, board conflict of interest policy. We do it every year just to make sure that we don't drop the ball on that rotating schedule. So that is in this packet, as well as the other MSBA updates. And we'll have a few more likely next month, but this is the majority of the first set. So you have 2 weeks for review and follow up with any questions, and we'll feel free to engage as necessary.
Very well. And then we will move to new business.
6.01, we'll ask
6.01.
Ask Dr. Shaw to come to the podium and give us an update.
Good evening. We have one item this evening for first read that exceeds the $500,000 threshold, so it will have to be a separate agenda item, and that is for the replacement of controls. We had bids that went out, and that was for replacement of controls for Holland, Jeffries, Sequiota, Twain, Weller Elementary Schools, and for Pershing K-8. The current controls that are in these locations are no longer supported by the manufacturer for replacement, and some of them are proprietary systems, and we can't work on those, and so there's a need to replace these. We did only receive one sealed bid. That was Associated Air Products. That will be the recommended contractor for this project. The total amount of the fiscal note is $716,810. This will be funded out of capital projects. So you can see the breakdown of each one of these projects, and they all are under the $500,000, but because they totaled that greater amount, we felt it was necessary to bring this to you for first read. Any questions that I can answer for you or clarification on these projects?
How many are proprietary systems? The notion of not being able to repair something because it's proprietary seems odd.
To know that exact answer, I don't have that for you right now, Charles. There is a specific vendor that we've had controls in the past that we have difficulty working on and getting their support, and they are very old as well, and so that creates a real problem for us to be able to continue to manage the controls. So I can get that answer for you.
Other questions?
Travis, I want to make sure you got one bid. Was this a competitive bid in that was this specified around one system or something where that caused only one bid? Or?
Right. So we do have a scope for controls that we want in our system. It allows our guys to work on it. Works with our thermostats. It works with all of our software. The reason we only received one bid on this was simply a controls replacement. There was no other equipment that was being installed. Therefore, Associated Air Products, or AAP as they're known in this region, they are the only dealer in the region that distributes these particular controls. So for a contractor outside of somebody who is a distributor to bid this, they're going to go directly to AAP to buy those controls. Therefore, there's no way that, since all we are doing is simply swapping out, that they can compete with that, and so they don't bid. We had 2 projects this past summer we did that AAP was the only bidder. They did the work this summer. I believe it was Westport and McBride. And so we're very familiar with their work. They do great work, but that's the reason behind why there's only one bidder on this particular project.
Okay.
Other questions?
Again, this will be voted at the next meeting, so
Yes.
it's just first read tonight.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will move to 6.02, Local Model Compliance Plan for Special Education, and our friend Brady Quirk is here to talk.
Good evening, good evening. Good to see you. So as in past years, we are required to annually adopt a local compliance plan that outlines how the district will implement the regulations from IDEA. So again, this year, the department has opted to go with the Missouri Model Plan, which this year actually has no changes, not even any wordsmithing, which is kind of unusual. So what you would be adopting is the exact same plan as last year.
It's a little hard to believe.
It's unusual, it is.
Again, you have 2 weeks to review. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Please reach out, and I will do what I can.
You don't
Brady
have
would
any
help you.
questions, Charles?
I do not.
I think
The whole
you
notion of not
silenced
having wordsmithing is
Charles,
weird to me.
and nobody, he doesn't know what to do, is what you said, so run away. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.
Mhm.
All right, now, we've got, hi Penny. We've got 6.03, medical stop loss coverage.
Ms. Benny
See if
will
you can
address
stump
this.
them too.
Well, good evening. We have before you, for your consideration this evening, renewal of our medical stop-loss coverage as a self-insured health plan. We ask you annually to adopt that stop-loss coverage. This coverage, it reinsures the district's health plan in case we have catastrophic year or significant costs associated with a claim or multiple claims that may come through our plan. Helps us prevent that financial loss as a result. J.W. Terrell marketed the renewal for competitive bids. We had 2 bids that were received, and we are recommending renewal of our current contract with Sun Life Financial. The premium for that coverage will be $1,478,578. That's an 18% increase over current year. That increase is due to more employees having high dollar claims and reaching that cap, as well as increased healthcare costs associated with providing care. Our deductible continues at $300,000, and we do have a $400,000 cap for specific claimants, any one specific claimant. So that's a 1.478 million cost.
Comes out of the health benefit trust account, and then we would ask for approval at the next meeting. Won't cause any adjustments to any of our rates. This is within the budget that we set. Obviously, came in a little higher than we'd hoped, and we'll monitor the HB HBT fund throughout the year and see what that means for next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to 7, unfinished business, and 7.01, architectural study, additions, and the return of Travis. Hello again.
Hello again. So I have some information for you that was feedback gathered from the most recent Community Task Force meeting on August 23rd. And this recommendation from the committee is to acquire some additional data regarding conceptual project study for the following items. First one is pricing for adding a wind shelter gymnasium to sites where currently there's only a combined gym and cafeteria. Pricing for Pershing K-8 renovation and new construction options, and Hillcrest High School as new construction. So this was information that in their discussion and conversation, the task force said we would like this information given to us. The recommendation, as you remember, this is a second expansion of the project study recommendation that took place at the approval in February. The first expansion of the study occurred August 21st, which included acquiring data for Bowerman Elementary and York Elementary as conceptual study to continue as K-5 buildings, adding secure vestibules at all of the sites that aren't currently part of the study, and the addition of early childhood classrooms as mini hubs on certain sites deemed later. The information gathered from this new study will be provided to the Board of Education and the Community Task Force as part of the comprehensive evaluation. It will provide assistance to the task force in reviewing information regarding the state of the facilities as they've been doing, and provide feedback and recommendations both to the board and administration regarding what those highest priority projects are that the task force believes the community will support in a future bond issue. So the fees are as follows. H Design, Hollis & Miller for the wind shelter gymnasium concept would be $1,200. Dake Wells for the Pershing K-8 renovation and new construction concept for $23,100. Buxton Cubic Dodd for the Hillcrest High School as new construction at $3,500. So total fees recommended for these new studies would be $27,800. And we are asking for board approval this evening so that this work can continue to move forward and we can get the information back to the task force and the board in a timely manner.
So Travis, I
Yes.
was just whispering, and I think it's better if I just ask this aloud. I was
Okay.
curious why there was such a significant cost differential between the Pershing K-8 renovation and new construction option at $23,100 and then the Hillcrest High School new construction at only $3,500, and I thought you might want to elaborate a little on that.
Right, so anytime you have two options versus one, you have that extensive amount of work. If you remember Hillcrest High School, we already have a renovation option, so they have a lot of things in their mind moving forward. This is what's needed, and so the work that's needed to, instead of renovating these places, we build new, creates less work for that group. But also when you start dealing with a renovation and new construction at Pershing, they've not looked at all at that facility whatsoever, so they're starting from ground zero. And so when we go back and look at the cost per building that Dake Wells did for each of the renovation versus new construction on those middle school sites, it's very comparable to that. And if you remember, Jarrett, Pipkin, Reed are all very similar, and so they were able to do a lot of the same work on those, but this is a completely different concept. And those of you that have seen Pershing, it's very different from the other side. So that would be why there is that discrepancy.
Thank you.
Mhm.
This is something we would ask for action tonight as the community task force is continuing to meet, and we want to get the architects to work quickly. The other projects that we've expanded, we expect to be coming to the community task force this month, and then this would hopefully come to them at the beginning of October, as well as the board. This would come out of bond funds that we have remaining still sitting in the bond account.
So do we need a motion?
We will.
I know you guys were at the meeting.
Right.
Do you anticipate that this is the final ask for architectural study work? Or do we know?
Don't, as your lawyer. Sorry.
Is that a fair question to ask?
Oh, it's fair, but I object.
This is what has been asked so far.
Okay.
And I have my doubts that there will be more asks, but I can't say for sure that it will be. But I think the important thing is that we need to act on this tonight so that they can get going, or not.
Is early October a reasonable turnaround time, late September, early October, from an architect
Yeah.
standpoint? And is that going to be enough time for the task force?
Well, it's essential that they get started tomorrow on the Pershing piece. The Hillcrest, I think, is going to be probably a little bit easier, and the fee reflected that because of the architect's familiarity already with the facility and with the program needs. I suspect that the middle school architects will be able to get right into it and go, and that's what we need. Yeah, 30 days or the end of the month is
We've met with them
not
to
unreasonable.
Create a timeline of follow-up meetings where they can ask for feedback, and they think they can hit the October study session, I think, or the October 1st session, which has been set as a meeting for the
Task force?
task force.
Yeah, okay, good.
The other two should be relatively simple too. They already have models of what that gym looks like, and Hillcrest they already have the square footage established. It's just putting a design together. So those will be fairly simple to deliver. The Pershing one will take research and time, so they are ready to get to work. So.
Any other questions? Okay, so do I have a motion that the board approve the recommendation for additional architectural study as Travis mentioned in his presentation?
Yep, so we got the three
Thank you,
projects that
Charles.
were listed. Yeah.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Tim. And would everyone please vote? And that passes. And we will move on to 7.02, and Travis will talk to us about the surplus property at Harrison, please.
So as a reminder, in accordance with Board of Education Policy DN, when the district no longer needs property or the property is not suitable to the district's needs, the board, by an affirmative vote, may authorize and direct the sale and transfer or lease of the property in accordance with law. At this time, administration recommends that the Board of Education authorize and direct the sale and transfer of lease of the excess property surrounding Harrison Elementary. This property, approximately 1.6 acres, is in addition to the excess Harrison property approved for surplus at the July 17, 2018 meeting. If approved by the board, the property will be listed with the district real estate broker, Perry Van Ness.
Any questions?
Any questions I can answer for you?
So small
Are we
addition.
voting on that tonight?
Yeah,
Need a
so
motion?
because we've already put the rest of the property out, this is just a small corner addition that we want to make sure we connect with that current listing. So as people are looking at it, we want to be able to tell them that it's all for sale.
You have a question?
No, but I'm ready to.
But
make
you're
a
ready
motion.
to move on. Does anyone have any questions for Travis? Okay, then do I have a motion that the Board of Education approve the recommendation of administration to declare attractive real estate located on South Glen Avenue in an unincorporated part of Greene County, which is part of the school district's property surrounding Harrison Elementary, as shown on Exhibit 1, which is attached and was just discussed, as surplus, and that it is not required for operation of the school program, and authorize and direct the sale and transfer or lease of the property identified.
I'd like to make that motion.
Why, thank you, Denise. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. And we can all vote. And that motion passes. And we will move on to Section 8, public comments to address non-agenda items, and I'm told by Mrs. Luton that we do not have any. So we will move past that to our strategic discussion, Section 9, 9.01, Focus Area 1, Goal 1, Dr. Dawson and company.
Number one.
Right up there in the bar. See it right up there by apps. Right there.
Thank you. So good evening.
Good evening.
Administration is bringing forth its annual Focus Area 1, Goal 1 end-of-year report for your review. In addition to the slide deck that we've done in the past, this year the team has coordinated and created a research white paper that goes into far more depth, far more detail regarding Focus Area 1, Goal 1. It will highlight the gains within this system and identifies gaps in the system and includes significant amount of subgroup data, and you can see I have it here, and it's also in your packet. We'll be highlighting a little bit of that throughout, and we'll be asking you to ask any questions throughout the presentation of myself or any of the other presenters who will be with you. Just my first task is really to create context around the strategic plan and remind you how it's framed up, and then kind of build that context for you in that capacity. So the strategic plan has 4 focus areas around learning, around effective teachers and leaders, around operations, and around communication, which you just recently approved within that. Each one of these focus areas has goals and strategies that drive the work within the system. For example, in Focus Area 1, there are 3 goals. We talk about these goals in the learning team specifically, but they're around the safety and of students, that you're going to see an in-depth presentation about that particular goal tonight. Goal 2 is really about student learning and access and accessibility. And then Goal 3 is really around those 4 C's, around critical thinking, communication, and collaboration. So you have to see all of that creativity. So that's kind of the framework, kind of starting large and then working our way down. Within this particular goal, Goal 1, which is the focus tonight, there are 3 specific strategies. There's going to be something around safety. You're going to hear a report around health resources, and you're going to hear about social and emotional needs. So I just wanted to make sure you understood the context of focus area, goals, and then strategies. And the strategies are what drive the work within the system. New to this work is a new term for you and a lot of for the system is priority metrics. Dr. Jungman took us on a year-long journey last year to help create clarity within our system about clarifying expectations, clarifying what's important, clarifying how we're going to measure across the district. And you can see we have a handout for you, but it also, and I'm prompting with my superintendent there, I have a handout for you.
Prompt affected.
Which I think is what I really enjoy, and I'm really thankful for John's leadership here to create clarity, because we have the APR report. We have it coming from the state, we have DESE, but this is far richer and holistic about the system for students. And what you're looking at right now is we have a culture and climate scorecard, and then we're also in the process of developing an academic scorecard. And they will be reported at the district level, at the division level, at the building level, to create that clarity within the system. But when you look at this front page of culture and climate, there's only really one thing that's measured for the APR, and that's student attendance. But we have taken that and said culture and climate is far more than just one aspect of student attendance. It's really about engagement. It's really about kids feeling around safety, and it is about their attendance, about how they do that. So you're going to see an in-depth presentation around this scorecard tonight with Dr. Range, and he'll take you through it. But it is chunked, and you can see this is the district level one. You can see demographics around attendance, and now we're talking about subgroups in attendance regarding lunch status or ethnicity. You can also see discipline. You can also see frequency rates, and you can see discipline rates. Then on the left side, all of those are trending lines
You can see those arrows. These are brought up from panorama data. They're using from APR data. This is a whole host of resources here. And you can then see how the district is trending over the last 2 years we've had that data. So in the one I would show you as an example, attendance. This one closer to the bottom, last arrow, and it's flat. So we have about 82% of our students coming 90% of the time. That's been a flat trend for us for the last couple of years. And then you can see how they correspond along the way with other ones. So this is a new term for us as district priority. This is where district metrics, where you'll see all schools moving in that particular space, moving those particular metrics. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just as you're looking at those, the definitions, as you're trying to figure out exactly, okay, what does that mean? What is a student relationship metric? It's based on a survey, grades 3 through 12, and asked about these issues, and here's the tool that was used in order to gather that feedback. So this gives you a little bit on the backside of how that metric is constructed, when it happens during the year, and what makes up that data point.
Can I ask one question about that? We may get to this later, but on discipline. Well, let's first set the context by saying, I think this is a terrific step forward. It reduces the amount that we don't know. I mean, some of the things that we now know are a little uncomfortable, but they will help us get back. Right? We'll be identify those things. But in terms of discipline, what does it mean for a student to be considered with discipline? Is all discipline the same? Like, kid gets sent to the office for whatever kids get sent to the office?
Referrals versus instructional time. So
Yeah.
I believe referrals would engage
It's
Dr. Ray.
students with suspensions.
Oh, it's suspension.
Yes, this is loss of instruction time.
So that's the loss of instruction. The
Right.
discipline, with discipline, is anybody with a referral.
Referral.
That's somebody who gets sent out of the classroom to
Getting a
the
referral.
principal's office or.
Yes.
Could be anything from a tardy
It's a loss of
to a,
instructions.
Phone
Suspension,
violation.
Discipline is referrals. I guess that's, you're asking.
Yeah,
about
I'm asking
discipline.
about discipline.
Just
Yeah,
about
the loss of instruction time makes sense. So one could be referred for a whole variety of.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. And that would fall into that first category of percentage of students with discipline.
Okay, so it's the referral.
Yeah, that's the referral part. That's
so
exactly.
that's the percentage of kids that got sent to the office,
Yeah.
basically, for a referral of some sort, whether that be a tardy or actual much more severe condition.
That's right. Good question. So you kind of understand this larger context of district metrics that all schools are focusing on. Then we've kind of come up with the term of process measures, and that's the next part in your presentation. And process measures are really the strategies. They're at the department level and what's being measured and monitored at that level. So tonight you're going to hear from Jim Farrell, who has the strategy around student safety, and one of his process measures is around the calls, the number of calls coming into dispatch or the priority of calls and their response time. So that's something internally that he's measuring as a process measure that drives that work around student safety. So hopefully that can differentiate a little bit about district metrics and then process measures. Questions about that? Okay, so tonight you're going to hear from Mr. Farrell about school safety. He'll be followed by Jean Graybill, who will talk about health resources, and Rhonda Mammon will talk about social and emotional. And then we'll have Dr. Range will come up and conclude with a deep dive into the priority metrics around culture and climate and answer any questions along the way. So, my pleasure to introduce.
No, you don't get to leave, right? What were you using to change the slide?
Magic.
No, don't do that to me. Okay. I don't know that I'll be as eloquent as Dr. Dawson, but I'll
That's
try.
okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Obviously, my focus area is what it is, and it's school safety and the safety of our kids. So as Dr. Dawson explained, we're going to look at our calls for service, the average response time for an officer, which you'll see is actually rather low, but please take into account that low number is a direct result of officers already being in buildings, which is a good thing. And then I'll also touch on some of Jean Grable's, our training, which is the staff that's been trained in CPR, first aid, and the AED units. So with that said, this is our number of calls for service, and we went back 3 years, and it addresses each level, elementary, middle, and high. But you'll notice that we're down this year, and there's some reasons for that. I would love to take the credit and tell you it's a direct result of the great officers we have. That is a portion of it, okay? But it's also a portion, another portion is that things like calls for service are cyclic, and they have peaks and valleys like anything else. Another portion is that we've got really good administrators in our buildings, and they're handling things at a level that maybe a couple years ago they were calling us for. And as they get more experience, they're dealing with student issues to allow us more free time to be a little more proactive and move on to the things that you would anticipate school police dealing with. These are our average response times, and so that's 0.29 of a minute. I will tell everyone in advance, that's kind of a little confusing way to do it. It'll be changed next year. It's been done like that, and there was no explanation. And next year, you will see minutes and seconds, okay?
What a good idea.
Yeah, it's novel. I like that whole KISS concept, keeping it simple. So, priority one, just to explain to everyone, is that's an urgent call. That's for law enforcement, that's somebody needs help right then, right there. If you don't get there quickly, somebody's gonna get hurt, worse, things like that. A priority two call, honestly, it could be as simple as a property crime, a theft that is already done. And so does an officer need to respond? Yes. Do we need to respond lights and sirens? No. We'll get there and take a report. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a little worried about asking this question, but I'm gonna do it anyway.
Now I'm getting a little worried about answering it. Go ahead.
As I look at that with my background and experience, I think that looks pretty good.
Sure does.
I would like to know if you think that looks pretty good.
I do think it looks good. But here's 0.29 of a minute is roughly 17 seconds, okay?
I can live with
So
that.
I go back to, we've got officers in the buildings. So that's helpful. But even the 4 minutes at 0.67 seconds or 0.67 of a minute, that's still a pretty good response time.
I think so.
We're fairly close at all times, and what you gotta understand is the majority of those, our patrol officers are responding from another school. But they're also priority two calls. There's no sense of urgency. There's not somebody in danger of being hurt. It's already a done deal, for lack of a better term.
I think it looks good. I'd be proud of that if I were you.
I think that as a whole, the team, that's something that they've worked on very hard to get better at.
That's
And-
obvious, is what I'm trying to say. That doesn't
Thank you.
happen by accident.
Thank you. I think that they're very proactive and do the best they can and really try to, we'll never, here, the sad part is we'll never know the numbers of what we stop before it happens, just by, taking care of some business. Any other questions?
Yeah, can I follow up on that? And this may seem like a stupid question, it probably is, but response time is from the call going in to what?
To arrival at the scene.
I would say that's pretty good.
I would say I'm pretty pleased with that,
I
yes.
couldn't make it from here to there in 7 minutes.
Well, that's good to know. We will not employ you.
Charles will not be applying to be a
Yeah,
school officer.
That's past being good.
Yeah, it is.
4-minute response to a call on a priority two is, I'm not
Pretty
gonna say
darn good.
is correct.
But the more important number really is the priority one,
That's right.
and that's really strong, and I'm
That's
grateful.
because you're there.
Correct. Thank you.
We're gonna keep them there.
Any other questions? Okay, so now we get into some of our training and what's been going on. And once again, this is one of those I'd love to take credit for, but really this is Gene Grable's team. And they have trained this year 412 staff in CPR and first aid. And then the rest got 1,566 staff members got trained on CPR, first aid, and AEDs. It's a combination course, which was, that number 1,500 is showing up now because we now have AEDs in buildings, which is, that's another one of those, kudos to everybody. That was a good purchase. That was a needed deal. And once again, we may never know until we save a life how good it is. Any questions on that? Because I'll defer to Gene.
Good quick.
Yes.
Have any students been trained in CPR or first aid?
Yes, it is a graduation requirement, so they are trained as part of their requirement, and we typically train them with hands only, CPR. And then we also talk about first aid procedures with them too, including choking for students. We haven't passed it along to students yet as far as AED training. That's for the future, because we want to continue to make sure that the adults are getting trained in the buildings too. And we would like to add that as part of additional training for students and plan to offer that.
How long has the CPR been in play, requirement? Has that been a while?
For students?
For students, for students.
It's within the last 12 to 24 months, I think.
Yeah, it's just been recently, hasn't it?
Yeah,
That's
it's
what I thought.
just been maybe.
Last year or year before last?
Like 2 years.
Okay.
This is, yeah, it's been 2 years.
I knew it was recent, but I couldn't remember how long.
Yeah.
Gene, did they do that in health class? Was that
Yes,
in health?
and they had a plan in place initially to try to get everyone, and so they taught it in different courses, so
Right.
that first year of graduation requirement, that they touched everyone that needed to have it as far as graduation requirements, but now it's basically taught in health.
Okay. I get it.
Any other questions? Okay. So here's truthfully for my team and myself, this is the exciting part. It's the next steps. It's how we can get better. And that's quite frankly what it is how can we get better at doing what we already do fairly well. And one of those is, for me, it was the best thing I heard when we were implementing, is we're going to get consistent procedures for access into the buildings. And that's a process that's going to take a little time, but we're working on it, and I think that's a really good thing. I think we ought to be able to take a substitute secretary and put them in any building, and the process for people coming into that building is the same everywhere they go. So that to us is great. Then standardized trainings and drill planning and reporting, which includes the, intensify, you guys know, all staff are required to attend this training. And the drill expectations are in every building. And we're no longer just going to accept that you're going to walk through your drill and be done anywhere. We're going to put a little challenge to the drill and make it educational at the same time. And it may simply be an officer, a fireman, or a staff member going, you can't come down this hall, the fire's this way. And causing that teacher of that class to think, what are my alternate routes out? Which is an excellent thing also. Obviously, the one we're excited about and has been ongoing is my officers are doing the annual ALICE training, which is alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. We're getting a lot of positive feedback from staff on that. That's a good thing. And then identifying threats, and we're working on that as a process to include, soon, I believe, we're going to have a text-to-tip line, which will help us. It'll give us the ability that we don't already have. And we all know that kids today, they don't communicate without texting. So I think that puts us ahead of a lot of ball games that are already out there.
Jen?
Yes,
I just
ma'am.
want to make one comment. Back to the ALICE training. I did have an opportunity to visit with a couple teachers that had been through their ALICE training. You just did some recently. And you have some very fired up teachers about thinking about how they might, just the awareness and thinking about how they might be prepared in the event of an intruder. Because it's not something that was a part of their lesson planning or their thinking, but as a result of the training, they're very, very aware of, and some have a very clear plan of what they're going to do. And the amazing thing to me was whatever it takes to protect their students. And we have some amazing teachers in our classrooms that will do whatever it takes to protect their students.
I think that's been the overwhelming response that our officers have gotten that have taught the class, is that's been the kind of mindset is, okay, whatever it takes, and to understand, police officers are always thinking, what's my plan if this happens, what's my plan if that happens? And sometimes it's difficult for us to understand why somebody might not think that way. But we're helping institute that in a whole new group of people, which is awesome. It really is.
Before you- The tip line,
Yes.
the text to tip, what's the process for that threats or the tips going to you?
It'll go to our dispatch center, which is, as you know, 24/7, 365.
Where does it go after that?
They will be asked to at least evaluate the level of the tip. I mean, if it's a tip that, you know, Johnny stole a bag from Susie, hopefully I won't get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning about that. But if they do, my phone is on. You know, they will come to me, most likely, or one of the 2 lieutenants that serve the area where we believe the tip is targeting, if that's the correct term.
At what point does it go to the next level of?
Oh, if we
either
know-
Local law or the state level to an information where it becomes a bigger threat than maybe just a particular school or something?
And that's so situational, sir. I mean, that's just a hard thing to actually define.
It's not automatic.
No, it's not automatic, because there's a lot that we'll be able to handle.
It should.
Then there might be some stuff that's a little bit out of our area of expertise, or we just don't have detectives that are trained on requesting things from Snapchat, if you will, so.
And I wasn't as concerned about handling it, because you guys can handle it. I'm not worried about that. It's just more information sharing
Oh, correct, yeah,
so people know
Mhm.
what we've got and what we've had,
yes.
and other districts know that we've had that threat.
Anything else? So, if everyone remembers, and this was actually the way it was my very first year here, we wanted to develop the district level emergency operation plan with Office of Emergency Management. That's been done. It's met. That goal has been met. So now we kind of have to refocus. And while that is a living document and something we can adjust and add to and take away from any day of the week of the year in future years, we decided to move forward with, obviously, we're going to expand the safety and security supports to include increased staff training, which we're already doing, improve threat identification processes, which we're moving to doing, and the safety and security of the physical improvements that you folks know about. And if there's no more questions, I believe Ms. Grable is up next.
Thank you. So, good evening. So just to remind everybody, we're talking about Focus Area 1, which is all about student success and learning support, and Goal 1, which is all about promoting and creating and maintaining a a safe and secure environment for our students. So my role is to talk to you about the health resources. So I'm going to talk about strategy 1.1.2. So that's all about removing barriers to learning. And if we can make some interventions with students, particularly with those health concerns, and we can make those resources available for them and make those connections, then they have better health outcomes, which then causes them to increase their attendance in school, and then they have better educational success. The 2 process measures that we're talking about in this particular area are talking about a number of partners that we have in providing aligned support, and then those accesses to the health, hunger, and medical resources. So, wait a minute, I went backwards, sorry. Jim, you didn't instruct me. I'm sorry, you left so soon. So this one, I believe you've seen before, because this, a couple of weeks ago, Mrs. Moore presented you some exciting news about what we've been working with, our percentage of our partnerships, and you can see that we've really looked on our strategies for strategically aligning our partners together. And she presented you those successes in the Ready, Set, and Supply initiative that just came on. So you can see that our number of partners has increased, and really the collaboration between those partners has increased too. So we saw some phenomenal things that have happened because we had some individuals that were in silos and not working together. And it took us a couple of years to get them to work together, but they are. And it's been a really positive impact for our students. Well, here's a whole smorgasbord of things, laundry list of things that we measure and health services and helping to support our kids. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I will highlight a few of them for you. So you may look at that first one and go, goodness, student individualized healthcare plans, what in the world does that have to do with anything? Well, if we have, and we do, we have over 15,000 students in our district that have 29,000 health concerns. So that's a significant number of health concerns that we have in the school district, and if we can intervene very quickly with them and provide a management plan for them at school, again, they have better outcomes, better health outcomes, and really it flows into home as well, because sometimes parents just don't know, they don't have the knowledge, or they don't even have the access to the medical provider. And we help them with that. So we help them make that connection, and then that improves their attendance, and then that improves their educational success. In the area of food insecurity, you have some bright orange t-shirts that are there, and so I want to mention Go Orange Day. And that is with our partnership with Ozarks Food Harvest, and we've been partners with them for a very long time, and they really are very supportive, not only in the backpack program, but helping us to address those food insecurity issues. You also got a flyer, I believe, that talks about the Go Orange Day, so this is just to create additional awareness, so we would encourage you to wear your t-shirts on September 13th for that. The actual Fighting Hunger annual food fight, that competition between schools begins in January this year. So we're really excited about that, and that more to come. We'll provide you some more information. The number of free and reduced lunch students, I would say that too, in that we can celebrate that the percentage of kids that were on free and reduced lunch went down somewhat, but we also want to always be cognizant of the fact that we want to make sure that those kids that didn't re-enroll, that we're following up with them. What was the reason why they didn't? So we've teamed up with nutrition services and principals and nurses and counselors to make sure that we're following up on those students. And I had the opportunity to call some parents, and they were grateful that we called them. They were grateful that we checked up on them. Oh, you know, my circumstances changed. I got a job. And we were able to celebrate that with those parents. So in some cases, it was that. But in other cases, it was, well, I thought the time had run out and I didn't think I could apply. Or, I don't know how to do it online. And so then we're able to help them through that process. And Nutrition Services has been to a number of open houses already, school nights for the school sites. And so they're making more of a presence to help people with increasing their applications for free and reduced lunch. I would also like to just mention the tooth truck too, because they're phenomenal. I talked about them last time, but can you imagine in the years that they've been providing services for us, it's over $15 million of dental services that they provided for our kids. And besides that, I ask them to look at absences for kids. So had that student, and their average appointment is 30 minutes. So they go out to the truck, they have the dental appointment. Well, normally for a child who is absent, who goes on to a dental appointment, that's usually a half day's worth of absence. So we did some comparisons there. And we looked at what those numbers were, and it was phenomenal. So the difference is 108 absences for the tooth truck versus 760 absences had they been gone a half day from school. So that's a difference of 651 absences. So we're going to continue to drill down with those things. I know that Dr. Dawson mentioned to you about the immunizations that were provided before school began, and that we had over 900 kids that were able to start school the first day because of our partnership with Jordan Valley. So these folks make a tremendous difference in the impact in health for our kids. So next steps for us in our conclusions, we certainly want to continue to look about that strategic approach with working with our community partners. And Marty Moore has done a phenomenal job in coordinating that massive event, if you will, with working with different partners, both from a perspective of those that address food insecurity And then I'm primarily working with those medical and dental health resources. And then we've also done some revision with the strategy for 1.1.2, and we're looking at more of a strategic report, support, and really wanted to include those community partners and the faith-based organizations within that. And we were really primarily focused earlier on those health issues and not including the faith-based organizations in there. So that's the change for that. Any questions? Okay. How did I do? Did I get done in time? All right.
You did fantastic.
All right, good deal. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Rhonda Mammon, who's the Director of Counseling.
Thank you, Jean.
Okay, save the best for last. I got to say that the other day when we were talking about the order, so, you know, no, I shouldn't say that. Dr. Range is going to speak last. As far as the programs are concerned, of course, you know, I have to believe that this is the best. So I'm going to talk to you just for a few minutes about our process measures for the strategy 1.1.3. We have focused in recent years on our school-based clinician support, which is and I guess an intervention, I'll call it, that we as a district were able to begin to fund again after we lost some federal funding. We have 5.5 school-based clinicians, and they actually are able to provide individual therapy for students that's on the school side. So many of our process measures center around that because we have seen some really good success and impact that's been done with that. We also are going to, and I'm going to show you in just a minute about some of the progress that's been reflected on the daily living activity assessment and then access to services. In 2016, we had 302 students referred to the school-based clinicians. This year, or I'm sorry, last year, that number rose to 450. That is a really large increase in numbers of students referred. Out of that 450, 229 of them received at least 12 sessions of individual therapy, or in some cases it was family or group counseling, but most of it was individual. 128 were referred to outside resources, and then out of that number, 93 actually declined services after the referral was made. And that could be for any number of reasons. It could have been that they moved, or they decided that it wasn't needed, or they went to their own therapist that someone else, or they may not have received any services at all. So, yes, sir.
Of those that were referred to outside resources, were those that had particular issues they were dealing with that went beyond internal expertise, or they had a preference for an outside resource, or both?
Most of them were because of that issue, or that you mentioned earlier that they had a more intensive issue that they needed, or they had a diagnosis that needed medical attention. It also could be that after the case was reviewed, they needed more of case management services, where just to access resources out in the community. So it could be any number of things. The other process measure that we're paying close attention to during the past 3 years is the number of staff that have been trained in the youth mental health first aid. That is a partnership that we developed with Community Partnership of the Ozarks to provide that training. And at the school side, it's facilitated by school counselors who are trained to be the trainers. So we have overall over 300 of our staff members that attended that training. It is an 8-hour training, which does take time out of the classroom, but it's everyone that's attended felt like that they think every teacher, staff person in our building that works with youth and young people really need to have that training. But one of the other things that we benefited from was the fact that Community Partnership was able to provide the sub support for that, so the district did not have to pay for subs to have that training.
That's
for our
grant
teachers.
supported, right?
Pardon me?
That's grant supported, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they
it
have a
is.
nice grant for that.
We are ending the last phase of that. Our September training is the last one that's funded by grants, but they have reapplied for another grant, so we should be able to continue that. The hope is that we'll be able to continue it.
So can we go back for a minute?
Sure.
And I'm gonna apologize ahead of time in case I'm being too picky.
Okay.
But when you look at that declined services number, percentage-wise, it's too high for my comfort level, and I'm gonna assume that you, my friend, would agree.
Yes.
Would it be possible to refine that a little bit more? Because I could be more comfortable if they moved, because we can't help them if they're gone. And then I would feel more comfortable if the reason they declined is because they're accessing mental health services in the community. I would really like to know the raw number of people who are continuing to be in our schools, who we've identified as needing help and not receiving any. Is that too much to ask?
No, actually, it's already been done.
Oh, good. So you'll tell me another time?
Do we have a link to the full report on there? Did we take it up?
I don't need it tonight, but I really want to know that because that number looks too high and
It is
Am I gonna
very,
feel better?
Every time they make a contact, the process for referral comes from the school counselors. They've already received permission from the parent to make a referral to the school-based clinician. So when the follow-up is done, they attempt 3 times to contact the parent for an appointment. If they don't respond, then they turn it over to the community support specialist, which is a social worker, to follow up with. And at that point, they, again, try to make contact. They try to see if the family needs something different, or if they've just decided that they don't want services, or sometimes they just are at a point in their life where they decide they can't do it right now. So there's a variety of reasons.
But what we're providing happens during the school day, correct?
Yes.
So it's not like they would have to drive someone to some extra appointment. I get that it has other barriers, but there is not an added barrier of needing to travel
There are
somewhere.
some that just change their mind.
Sure.
Or they don't fully understand what that means at the time that the counselor talks to them.
Thank
So
you.
that could be it.
Denise, do you have a question?
In the mental health first aid training, does that include the piece on suicide awareness?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's the real heavy part of that piece of the training.
And the number a little lower this year than last year? I know it's not significant, but.
Yeah,
Is there-
and part of that is just the timing of it. We offer it at certain times, and so it's pretty, we try not to conflict with anything major that's going on. The other issue that affected it a little bit this year is that we really had a large number of subs needed every day, and so that really didn't become a priority for principals when they knew, even though the sub was being paid for, if they couldn't get a sub, then they didn't want their teacher to be out during that time.
But is it exclusively volunteers to engage in the program?
You mean as far as teachers are
I
concerned?
mean, like, who decides to participate in that? It's exclusively based on their
Right.
incentive
They
to-
request to attend based
Well,
on,
I would like you to pass on, I think I speak for all of us, that's really much appreciated by us, because that's something that's important, to have that skill, and I really appreciate them taking the time to go through that. I've heard nothing but great things. We have it at MSU also, and we've partnered with them. I just think it's important information these days.
we would like for it to be, we've offered it on Saturdays and during non-contract time too, and many of our staff have taken it. We just don't have a way to track those that take it outside of school in the same way that we have. Those are the trainings that we've actually facilitated here.
So that number could be higher if you
And I'm
were
sure it
tracking
is
those on
higher.
Saturdays.
I'm sure it is higher.
I'm sure
Okay.
Chris Davis could tell you
Yeah.
the answer to that question.
Well, they don't necessarily sign up as SPS employees when they take it. I mean, they don't ask that question when they
Okay.
enroll
Yeah.
in the course, in the
Okay.
training.
Well, we appreciate it. That's important information these days, and they're sacrificing to get it.
Yeah. The other thing is we had some staff that took the training before we started tracking this, or before we got the grant. We had some sessions off and on throughout the last probably 5 years we've been doing it. So I would say we probably have close to 500 total people that we trained. So it could be more. It needs to be more.
It will be eventually.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I just want to take a couple of minutes and explain this data to you in terms of, we talked about the improvement in functioning of our students who are receiving individual therapy from our school-based clinicians. We were able to track 204 of the students that received at least 12 sessions this year, or this was 16-17. Of those students, they are given this assessment at the beginning of treatment. And what it amounts to is they give them, they rate them on the basis of 20 different daily living activities that could range anywhere from health practices all the way to problem solving. It's communication, family relations, social networking, and they rate them from 1 to 6. 1 is extremely inadequate functioning. That's the lowest functioning level you can get, all the way up to 6, which is considered adequate functioning. So what you're seeing here is as they go through their, they complete this assessment every quarter as they're working with the school-based clinician. As you can see, the progress that they make, this is a composite score. It's not, and if you look at individual scores, of course, it's going to vary. There are going to be some that started a lot lower and gained a lot more. But overall, of the 204 students that were that we tracked with this, we saw a significant improvement overall in the time they were working with the school-based clinicians. Okay, so our next steps for this school year for 2018-19, where we have been able to purchase some new classroom and small group curriculum for the school counselors to facilitate through money that we received through Title IV. It will provide hands-on solutions for dropout prevention, violence prevention, truancy reduction, and increased academic success. And so that the counselors are all being trained on that as we go out through the school year. So we're hoping to be able to put a lot of that in place for this next school year. Also, our district homeless liaison, Lynn Shirk, will continue to expand her services and the community partnerships, and will continue to evaluate the impact of the additional resources. And then, as you know, that we are going to, as part of the school safety series, each school site counselor will implement a 2-hour training in the area of mental health awareness. We're going to, during that time, we'll talk about suicide prevention, bullying, violence prevention, and then also identifying signs of emotional distress and trauma in students. And the big news is, this is exciting as we move forward, we're going to be requesting proposals from qualified vendors to provide mental health services to 11 schools, and that will be primarily the Hillcrest feeder pattern, to support students and families, and we're going to be selecting those by a number of risk factors. So that is a result of the fact that Medicaid regulations are changing, and so private providers of mental health services can now come into the schools and bill Medicaid. So many of those 11 schools are highest free and reduced lunch rate schools, which means many of them will be eligible for Medicaid services. So we're hoping that we, in the next few weeks, will be able to roll that out and begin to review proposals to provide more services with that. So we're really excited about that.
May I ask you a question about that?
Yes.
I don't want to sound picky, because that's fantastic. But if you weren't in one of those 11 schools, but you were Medicaid eligible and you were identified as someone who needed that service, is there any way that we can make it available to you?
Yes.
Okay. Take
Because
that
we're
answer
going to
from
we're
us,
going to be
yes.
able to shift our school-based clinician support away from those schools over to the other schools to do that.
Thank you.
So we will make sure those are covered.
Thank you.
We are also going to revise this strategy, change the wording a little bit, and also include what we're going to be doing with updating and evaluating our curriculum and training our school personnel to put more emphasis on that. Of course, course, we'll continue to do whatever we can to support students in their mental health concerns. So, questions that you haven't already answered? Jill?
No, I'm done.
I just make a comment. I really appreciate what you're doing and what Jean's doing with respect to the mental health and just the health side of it. Because I think what you guys do impacts what Jim does ultimately, with discipline, with issues that are out there, with what you're dealing with. And you got to deal with the causes, and that's what you guys are dealing with. And I just really appreciate that it's a high-level strategy and it's a high-level goal that we focus on those things and not just respond to symptoms, but truly address some of the causes. And so I'm really happy to see the effort that you guys are doing, both of you, and Jim too, but I'm just saying, what you do certainly impacts some of the things that he has to respond to. So, job well done.
Thank you. All right, now, Dr. Brett Range. Finish it up for us.
Take us home. I will take us home. Good evening.
Good evening.
We are excited to be presenting this information to you. I am going to use the, if this thing works, does it work, Stephen?
Is it on? Yeah.
Is it on? That might help. That might help. It was not on. So that would be that. So I'm going to use the laser pointer because there's some charts coming up. So would it be better if I do it that way? I'm assuming everybody's looking.
Any way you want
So
to do it, yeah.
I will shoot it that way.
Okay.
And not shoot you in the eyes. I'm going to avoid that.
Good choice.
Okay, so I am the concluding person of this presentation of the climate and culture kind of scorecard rollout here. And we feel like this is really the meat of the presentation. So what I am going to do is the end of that white paper, if you've had a chance to read it, mimics what we're going to talk about here. And it's a deep dive into what the priority metrics told us are, number one, some celebrations, some strength areas that we show. But most importantly, it points out opportunities for improvement. And you're going to see a common theme develop over these as we roll these out. And then it will cause us to need to add something to the strategic plan to address those issues. So this is kind of the introduction slide. So we're going to kind of take a deep dive into this, and I will try to walk you through these as best I can. So I'm going to have Dr. Jungman pass this scorecard out to you, and I'll let you get it before I talk over it so you can look at it.
Ooh, more colors.
So this scorecard looks very similar to the one that Dr. Dawson passed out. However, it's got some different colors on it. And so what this is it's a fake school. It's made up data. That's not a real school. But this is what our school leaders get when they get their site-specific card or scorecard. And those colors in the middle there, that middle row there, the yellow, the red, and the green, that shows, the cool thing about that is they're comparing themselves to peers based on those individual metrics. And right now, those peers are just within our district. Eventually, we hope to bring in state peers on the information that we collect at the state level. So that would be stuff like MAP scores, attendance rate, dropout rate, ACT scores. And then, if I was at Kickapoo High School, then I could compare myself to other high schools in the state that are like Kickapoo on those metrics. So right now, this is what the school leaders will get, and it will just be with peers within our own system. It's got the same metrics that were on the initial card you saw earlier when Dr. Dawson spoke, and the definitions are on the back. But this one does look a little bit different because of that ability to compare with peers. So moving through that white paper, the white paper ends with our analysis around three kind of big trends. So this culture and climate scorecard is based upon three kind of big areas: engagement, safety, and attendance. Those are the three areas that make up that scorecard. So what we did in the end was, before we really take a deep dive, after we take a deep dive into those areas, we kind of step back and try to make summary statements about what did we see in those areas. And so these 5 bullet points are what we see in the engagement areas. So on that scorecard, the first thing I want to remind you of or say is engagement. We define engagement on that scorecard as students' perceptions based on some panorama survey questions we ask them, and also their participation in extracurricular activities at the secondary level, middle and high school. So,
Do
go
you
ahead.
like the panorama questions? Do they really get at, in your judgment, what we think we're interested in?
I think we've been pleased with them thus far, yes, yes. I would say overall, after you give a survey, there's always like, I wish I would have asked it this way.
Sure.
But for the most part, I think we are pretty satisfied with it.
You have another question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just to
okay.
clarify.
Yeah.
This is not one of our high schools.
That is
This
not,
is just
that
a
is
mock.
just made up, it's just
Okay,
made up
just
data that we
clarifying.
made up.
And then, can you, what is MS? What is that?
So that right-hand side would be their level. So it'd be like elementary school, middle school, high school. So that's kind of the division. So MS means, that actually should be high school. It shouldn't be MS. It should be high
Okay.
school. 'Cause that would
So
be
that would be where you compare yourself to your system average. So if it was a high school card, it should say high school, and then those would be the system high school average. If it was a middle school card, it would say MS. If it's an elementary card, it would say elementary school. So you have your demographic data up in the left-hand corner that says how many kids we've got. This is kind of
Right.
the free and reduced percentage, the grade level breakout. You see that's an elementary data point there, right? Because you see an individual grade level K through 5. You also see the stability rate, you see the mobility rate. So it gives you all the demographic makeup of a building, and then you move to the performance side. And then we dive into a couple of data points that are tracked at both the state and more federal level, and that's the discipline and attendance data, and we start to dive into some demographic information on the scorecards. Now, each building level has the ability to dive into most of those categories by demographic, and that's what you saw in the white paper, where we started to do that as an elementary group, as a middle group, and as a high group. But this is a starting point, and then they can use Power BI to dive deeper with their staff to really get into strategy. So with that right-hand column, to your point, is just the system average for those.
high school.
Within that
groups.
division.
You
Yeah,
got
like
it.
all the high schools, middle schools, or elementaries.
So pretend that says HS
Right.
instead of MS,
Right, okay.
right? That card is just a culmination of different products to give a picture of what it looks like. So we didn't want to use anybody's
Gotcha.
real data.
Yep.
So
Now, this is kind of a nerdy question, but the trend here,
Yeah.
is that a numerical trend, up, down, or a favorability trend? For example, sometimes an arrow down is a very good thing, right? If it's reduce discipline issue, whatever, or is that, if that goes down, does the arrow go
We
up?
want to see arrows going up.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to see arrows going up, and those arrows are based on 2 years of data, so 2 years.
That might be something that you think about how you lay this out,
That's
because
a
if
good-
the number's going down, you may look down or something.
That's a
Well, and I
great
think that's something to put on the backside as we think about definitions. We're
Yeah.
gonna add
Yeah.
stability and mobility. We'll also add definitions regarding if the arrow is a trend positive or a trend negative, to
Yeah.
make sure that you're deciphering and decoding that right, because it's really important that we understand the data, and it doesn't lead us in the wrong direction. So, first draft of it, we're still getting better at it, but those are great points for us to make sure that we define really on the back. So as you're flipping through the district or the elementary or middle or high, it can lead to quick analysis of data. So
It's good feedback, it's really good. Thank you. So, diving into this into the engagement area on the scorecard, when you look at it from kind of a summary standpoint after we did the analysis, these 5 statements are kind of our big summary statements, and there are some common themes in those. So the first 3 kind of all mirror each other. So at the elementary and middle school level, students are 25% and 22% more positive about the relationships they have with teachers in high school. The second bullet, favorable feedback on the level of classroom engagement drops by 18% from elementary to middle school, and then remains low at the high school level. And then that third one, school engagement feedback is highest at elementary, drops at middle school, and then drops again to 25% at the high school level. So the common theme there you can see is that students are reporting that they're engaged in elementary schools, and that engagement trickles down as they move up through middle school and high school. And that has to do with not only classroom engagement, but also their perceptions of their relationship with their teacher, which we'll show you that graph here shortly. The bottom bullet points are connected because this is participation in extracurricular activities. So we don't measure this right now at the elementary level. That might be something that we eventually do. But right now, this is just middle and high school. So right now, roughly 70% of our middle schoolers participate in extracurricular activities, and at the high school level, it's about 55%. This last bullet here breaks it down when you look at it through the lens of lunch status. So students who are on free lunch participate much less in extracurricular activities at the middle school level and at the high school level when you compare those kids to full-pay students. And that's obviously an opportunity for improvement. We need to fix that and work on fixing it.
We
So
agree.
those are the, thank you. So those are kind of the engagement construct, the engagement summary statements from a high level. This is an example of a table. So for the sake of time this evening, we didn't put every table in this presentation because there are a lot of tables in that white paper. This is just an example of one. So what this is this is students' perceptions of their relationship with teachers, okay? And it's based on their responses to those three questions over here. How respectful teachers are towards students, teacher concern for students, and teachers wanting to know about their students' excitement to return to the same teacher the next year. So when you kind of think about this, we want kids to agree to those statements at a high level, and that's what we're trying to measure here. So when you look at those statements from a really 30,000-foot level, elementary students are more positive about those statements, as noted by green. Green means good, high. And then red is low at the high school level. Then when you break those statements down by lunch status, full pay elementary students rated those statements the highest, whereas reduced pay high school students rated it the lowest. That being said, the free kids were only a percentage point off that, so it's very close. And then when you break it down by ethnicity, white elementary students rated those statements, agreed with those statements at the highest level, whereas black high school students rated those statements the lowest. So obviously you see some opportunities for improvement based on the data that's in that chart, and that same data plays out in multiple charts in that section. Any questions on that?
This is going to sound like a silly question, and it is, in fact. But
There are
number
no
three,
silly
teachers wanting to know about their students' excitement to return to the same teacher. Does that mean I want to be held back? I mean,
It is a
It's
strange
it's not
question.
always often that
Yeah.
you're going to have the opportunity to go back to the same teacher unless you're in the same class, the same grade. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think the intent is, and I'm guessing the intent is, I like this person, I would like to have them again for a teacher. I
Okay,
think
so
that's
they
the
would
intent.
like to?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't know that wording actually represents the question very accurately. We'll go back and look at it to make sure, follow up with it. Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of charts in there, and you can spend lots of time looking at those, and I think you're gonna see, I know you will see, because we've looked at them, similar trends that come out on this chart, and we will summarize those at the end. This is the safety area, kind of big summary statements after we did the analysis around the safety issues. So we define safety, again, through the lens of Panorama, so students' perceptions of feeling safe at school. The neat thing about Panorama on this one is we can also bring the parents in, because we have a parent survey that we administer to them, which we don't on the engagement piece yet. And then we also bring in that discipline rate, the amount of discipline, frequency rates, and incident rates. That is included in this safety area. So these kind of 6 statements are our summary of what we learned in this area. So school safety feedback from both students and parents is highest at elementary, and then it goes down as you move up from into middle school and high school. That is very similar to what the engagement perceptual data look like too. Reports of bullying are most prevalent at middle schools, and ideas of suicide are highest at the high school level. Students who qualify for free lunch are more than twice as likely to receive discipline than a student who is full pay, which is a major area of an opportunity for improvement, a big one. Students who are black have the highest discipline frequency rate and are 12% more likely to have received discipline than white students. Again, an area that really needs to improve. Middle school black students who had discipline spent an average of 16 days being suspended either in school or out of school. And the last bullet is actually a celebration point in that ELL students had the lowest percent of students with discipline and the lowest frequency rates. So kind of a theme that you see on those summary statements is similar to what you had on the engagement areas with issues with free students and also students that are underrepresented, that aren't white. This is the chart that we pulled into this section of the presentation. So again, this is panorama survey, and it's student perceptions around school safety regarding those 4 areas. The students feeling safe at school, their perceptions of fairness of discipline, teacher rule enforcement, and then principal keeping the school environment safe. And again, green means high, red means low. So when you look at the district from a 30,000 foot level, elementary students rated those statements the highest, whereas high school students rated them the lowest. You break it down by lunch status, full pay elementary students rated them the highest, whereas free and reduced high school students rated them the lowest. And then when you break it down by subgroup, white elementary students rated them the highest, whereas black high school students rated them the lowest. So it's very similar pattern with on the safety area as it was with the engagement area. Questions on that? Now we move into the last section, and this is the attendance section, and we define attendance as students that are attending 90% or greater of the amount of time that we are in school. So 90% is what we're shooting for. So these are kind of the 3 big broad statements that we made based on our analysis of the attendance data. Oops, sorry. That 82% of all students attended school 90% of the time. However, high school students had the lowest rates of attendance at 74%, all getting to that 90%. Second bullet there, only 73% of students who qualified for free lunch hit the 90% attendance metric, whereas 91% of full pay students did. So it's again, that disconnect between full pay versus free pay students on free lunch. And then the last bullet, the subgroups of black students and those who qualified for an IEP had the lowest percent of students achieving the 90% attendance mark across all 3 grade spans, meaning elementary, middle, and high school. They had the lowest rates of attendance, which is a big opportunity for improvement.
Just to give you a little bit of a picture, 90% attendance, if you think of 172 attendance days, so 90% of attendance is still missing 3 weeks of school, right? So 90% is the metric that the state uses to grant APR points. It's still, we believe, a relatively low bar of expectation. 95% is A+ qualifying, so you got to hit that metric to hit the A+ qualification. So 3 weeks of missing school is a lot of missed days. And then if you look at the next chart, which Brett's going to show you, some of the percentages of kids that are missing 3 weeks of school is staggering in some of our subgroups, and we've got to work on ways to identify and move that needle.
It's even worse, thanks.
So this is the chart. This is the only chart in that section because we only report on the 90% attendance metric. So when you look at the district from a high level, elementary has the highest rates of students that are attending school, whereas high school had the lowest. However, we still didn't hit 90% even at the elementary level. We're still at 86%. When you break that down on lunch status, you've got elementary full pay students attended at the highest rates, whereas free students at the high school level attended at the lowest rates. When you break it down by ethnicity, white elementary students attended school the most, and then you have black high school students attended percentages that were the lowest. And then you can see the rest of these are broken down by ELL and IEP students versus non-IEP students. But again, that same theme of under-resourced students, underrepresented students not performing at the same level as other students comes out in this chart also. And it's an area that we need to improve. So what we did, the next 2 slides, are the current strategies that we are using right now to address some of these issues. Some of them are strategies that have been around for a while, and some of them are things that are new that we've developed over the past couple of years. We clumped the engagement and attendance strategies together because we know that if kids are engaged, they feel engaged in school, they feel like they have a relationship with an adult, that they're more likely to attend school on a more regular basis. So we felt like these fit together well. You can make the argument that the safety construct fits in there well too. So, but we just grouped these together. So the first one, using attendance advisors. We've had attendance advisors for quite some time. We continue to use them to monitor and encourage regular school attendance, and it's probably something that we need to continue to study, their effects on moving those attendance metrics. Expanding virtual courses to allow for course access. Our online continues to grow. It grows in the summer, it grows during the regular school year. We need to continue to leverage that because we know high school students and even some of our middle school students enjoy that mode of learning. Yes, ma'am.
So, I certainly agree with what you just said, but I'm curious whether you have looked at if there is overlap between those populations. Like, I recognize that there's a huge boom in the people who are interested in online learning. And I know there is some population, because we have friends who work so hard to engage people who haven't been engaged, but I'm a little dubious that there's a lot of overlap between those two groups. Can you tell me I'm wrong?
You mean the kids that need to be engaged in their success in
Really hitting those courses, right?
Yeah, those ones who were worried about not engaged and not attending, and who's been part of the huge expansion in the virtual online learning. I am doubting that there's a ton of overlap
We
there.
haven't looked at that, and that's a great point.
Is it fair to be curious about
It
that?
is, it's very curious.
Okay.
It's very fair to be curious.
Okay.
It's a great point. It's a great point.
I'd
It
still
needs
be
to
in
be looked
favor
at.
of both, but I don't think that that's the panacea we're looking for those groups that are not engaged, which, by the way, I'm very upset and depressed tonight, so I hope to God you say something nice, because this is just awful. But I just think we need to check, because I don't think that's the same group.
Well, and it's a great point. I think it's something that we need to investigate for sure. Were you going to say something?
No,
Okay.
surprisingly, no.
Okay, so this expansion of online courses was where I was at. Next bullet down, the expanding extracurricular activities. I think all of us saw how great the archery was in the middle schools last year. How it got the kids excited, how many kids we actually had participated in it. We've got to find other things like that to get more kids enrolled.
Can we clap now?
extracurricular
I mean,
activities.
can't we, you guys, clap for that?
Absolutely.
I didn't hear you clap, though. That's a great idea, Brett.
I'm glad I have one. I've got one.
1.5, I made her clap with me.
So next bullet, offering middle college, career center, GoCaps fits in there, trying to get kids introduced to future career options early, because we know that those types of classes are engaging to them, because they see this is actually a real life skill that I'm putting in place that I might use someday. And the last one is something that we've just started this year. Is we know smaller learning communities is probably what we need, because we think engagement and attendance will go up there. So we are piloting those freshman academies at both Glendale and Hillcrest. And at the end of this year, hopefully we're able to come back and say, hey, the engagement in this area based on Panorama was high, and so was their attendance. Their attendance was good. And so that's something that we can possibly look at expanding. These are the strategies or the things that we are currently doing now for school safety. So you've heard a lot about this. Some of you are in this work very deep. Adding and improving secure vestibules. Ms. Embry and Dr. Shaw even talked about that at the last board meeting. Auditing and upgrading exterior cameras and intercom systems. That's currently going on. The third one is my favorite. Jim already talked about this, adding that text tip line. So that's going to hopefully roll out in the middle of September, and we think that that will be something that students, we hope that that moves that safety metric, because it's a way for them to anonymously report threats of violence, bullying, self-harm. It's just another way for them to report in an anonymous way, and we need to make sure that it's anonymous, because we just feel like that will really help us. And then the last two bullets deal with something Jim already kind of talked about, but it's this expanding of training. So moving ALICE training to every year as opposed to every 3 years, we feel like is going to positively move those safety metrics moving forward. And then just making sure that we have consistent procedures and processes for access control, how we do drills, how we report drills, how serious we do take drills when we have drills, making sure that everybody is applying that same level of seriousness to those issues in the safety world. So, that being said, this is the most important slide of the entire deck right here. This is our first kind of shot at doing a deep dive into just this area, just this culture and climate scorecard. And as you can see, it illuminates some inequity in the system. Some inequity in the system when it comes to engagement, some inequity in the system when it comes to students' perceptions of safety, and also attendance. And really, that second sentence is the most important one. The under-resourced and underrepresented students are consistently below performance levels in each of the 3 priority metric categories, especially when you compare their performance to full-pay students and white students. They're performing at levels that are lower than those students. And so we need to address that issue. And so what we are going to do this evening is recommend the addition of this strategy to the strategic plan. We've kind of wordsmithed it that way. The district will research, develop, and deploy strategies that improve engagement, safety, and attendance rates for under-resourced and underrepresented student populations. So we think, we hope, we know, by writing it down, by keeping it in front of site leaders, that we create a sense of urgency that we need to fix these student outcomes for these 2 groups of students. And we need also to work with our site leaders in coming up with strategies, and also community partners that also have great ideas on how to do this too. So this tonight is the first step in this. It's illuminating the inequity, and then being comfortable and being transparent and having the courage to say it, and then trying to fix it, trying to come up with a strategy to fix it. Coming October 2nd. So the next strategic plan update will be October 2nd. Myself and some other colleagues will be back here presenting on the student achievement piece. So that evening will be a deep dive into the student achievement piece, which is iReady, maps. Hopefully we have some maps. I don't think we have map scores back.
It'll be last year's map data, because we won't get that till December.
Yeah, it'll be a while. We'll look at course failure rates, but it'll be a deep dive, and it'll be disaggregating that data based on lunch status, based on subgroups, and really trying to come up with, really think through strategy on moving those metrics in positive ways too. So that being said, I will open it up for any questions that you have for me and the team.
What you got, Charles?
Well, first, this is hard work. I mean, so I celebrate the fact that you've done really hard, and it's messy, it's inherently imperfect, and you know the hardest part probably is you've got sort of you've got people who are screaming for more data, myself included, but at the same time, right, you've got to make really tough choices when it comes to, because not everything that we can easily measure is meaningful, and not everything meaningful is easily measured, right? So you're damned if you do and damned if you do in that regard. So I appreciate you being damned in this regard. So you have done some, I think, some really good work. And I think perhaps most centrally, it calls attention to some, I think, demonstrable differences, particularly in terms of race and socioeconomic status. And I think having the data that, at least with 2 years worth, you know, we see what the trends are. And I can't say this really without the data, but this is neither new, nor is this a surprise. And I think this is a really good moment for us to explain these and to respond to them. And I think this is a very significant first step in doing that. So we've got some challenges out there, but at least we know what they are, right? And we have good data for them.
And again, that was our intent to illuminate it tonight, and then to work moving forward with strategies on how to fix it.
And that's what's important to know. Every building, we have teachers working incredibly hard on these things, right? So this isn't new work. This is work that they've been working on for years. But in the things that we talked about, that Jim talked about at safety, and Rhonda and Jean, all of those things help either hold metrics or move metrics, but it's not enough, right? And it's not necessarily about working harder, but it's about thinking about the data and maybe working more strategic in very focused, targeted areas where we see the data really lagging, right? And you look for those gaps, and you look how those gaps grow at different points between different populations, and then you have a target audience to really begin to develop deeper strategies, and I think that's what our goal is. And we have celebrations, right? If we had the building level data of each one of the buildings, you would see outliers, right? You would see people that are outperforming and doing good things. So part of ours work is using the building level data to identify the best practices that are already going on in the systems, shining a light on those and then asking other leaders to try to figure out how to replicate in your system. And that won't just happen internally, but that'll happen externally also as we look at peer performance across the state on some of the same metrics, both academic and climate and culture. But this is our first time of ever really putting together a comprehensive look at climate and culture instead of just saying, hey, here's an attendance and a discipline data set. This is a holistic view of student voice, parent voice, and other metrics that we believe that we can use as a launching point to continue the work. So.
I mean, if you don't know where you are, you have no idea where you're going to go. So to me, this tells us where we are right now and gives you a roadmap of at least where we need to put resources. I'm with Charles. I think this is where we'll start. I may not like the data, which is fine, but now I know what to focus on. And the questions are answered. Not answered, but illuminated, I guess, is the best way to do it.
And it holds us accountable.
I may not like it, but it's.
That's exactly right.
It tells us where we need to be.
And I love being in nerdvana about all this. This is great.
Geek out. I would just say that, first of all, for everyone who presented tonight, it was you did a great job in educating us, so good work for the team. And also, this is a ton of work. I mean, the white pages here and tons of reporting data, so I just know you guys have been working really hard, so thank you.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
And then, this is, I don't like to use the word exciting because when you're talking about data,
Oh, go ahead.
it's not, I mean, like, it's not an emotional type thing, but it is kind of for me. That this is a great leap in the right direction, and this is part of our board conversations. You know, instead of them being in separate buckets and silos of data here and data here, just bringing it all together is very beneficial for us to look at it in context and see the bigger picture. So I'm thrilled, and thank you and your team and for your vision for moving us forward as a district.
Bruce?
I think the reports tonight, I've been here a long time, just a long time. And, our biggest debate 20-something years ago was whether we were going to arm school resource officers or not. I remember those meetings well at 940 North Jefferson. We had rooms full of people for and against that. Now we're talking about safety measures that go so far beyond that. I think we were ahead of the time now because I still see reports on TV where they voted to actually have a school resource officers someplace, you know. So I think we were way ahead at that time. But now there are so many safety concerns that we're trying to address, and we know the hierarchy of needs. You have to feel safe, and some of those data says they don't feel safe, and so how do we make that happen? And then as a health thing with Jean, I mean, we fought for years just to try to get a nurse in every school because we didn't have them, but they really just addressed, are you sick and you need somebody to help you? And we, you know, and now what are we doing, you know? So, and the same with Rhonda. I was a counselor. I don't know about socioeconomic mental health. I had students who had mental health issues, and I didn't know how to help them, and there were no resources to help them. There were none. We couldn't. There was nobody, you know, and it was a very awful experience, and where we are now. So, in some ways, this is a kind of sad report that we're talking about all these issues. I mean, to me, it's kind of sad, but we've got a community who's trying to help us, but we're really trying to address most of these issues at a school, in our school, with resources, And it still is the same. I think a first grade teacher who wants to teach reading still wants to teach reading. They still would like to, I'd like to teach kids how to read. And then, so now we've got all these other resources that we know where some of the gaps are, but I'm not sure we've come up with the answer. So it's still kind of scary to me that we've got the data. So what does that first grade teacher do with that? Because he or she still wants that kid to leave first grade with whatever skills are there, to, you know, and I've got these people who can help with health needs, and I got people who can help with safety needs, and I got people who can help with mental needs and all that stuff. But what do I need to do so when they leave? I think that's what we're trying to do, so that I'm not still, you know, I still remember that Encore report and how many students are behind, you know, and it's still, so I know there's, being here this long, I know there's not a magic thing that's gonna ever happen. This is not ever gonna happen. There's not a magic deal. Oh, new program, this will help, we'll get that. It won't. It's just, but what is it that we can do to, because this all boils down to teachers, classrooms, kids entering with problems that they have based on something that they probably had almost zero to do with. But they bring them in, and then we want this next report you're going to give to be a good one on they're all going to achieve and be able to overcome these difficulties. And I don't know, in some ways I'm optimistic because we've got all these resources available. And I want to be optimistic that we can finally be able to say to those teachers that are teaching the kids every day, here's what it is you need to do to move those numbers all to green. And if you'll do this, the numbers will move. You know, that's all you got to do is just, because when they say, oh, build a relationship with kids, come on, that isn't new. That was when I started teaching. I mean, that's not new. That's the same thing that was taught 50 years ago. Build relationships with kids. That's not new. So that isn't the only answer. That's not the only answer. So it still kind of scares me that we're going to have all this and we're going to target it, but we still aren't going to know exactly what to do. And if it doesn't move, then, you know, we can take the blame, but really it's those teachers in the classroom. I don't see it any different. I don't see when I go around the schools and they're 22 years old or they've been in that classroom 40 years, they want the kids to be successful. They really do. And so what can we do now? What can we do once we get all this data to be able to say, if you will do these things, that needle is going to move? Because if we don't, I guess it's good to have all this, but if we can't move the needle, then we spend a whole lot of time and effort on doing things that Charles said we already knew most of this, but now we've got the actual numbers. We didn't know it. We thought it. That's what we thought. If we thought, and so I don't know. It's good, but the next step is the part that kind of really concerns me. We're talking about facilities. We're talking about resources. We're talking about dealing with all emotional needs, mental health needs, food needs. I guess we had kids that were homeless. I don't know. I'm sure we've always had homeless kids. We just didn't know it. You know, we're talking about all those things. Exactly what are we going to do so that if you do it, the kids will be successful?
If all we do is look at this data every year, then we will not have done very much.
Right.
got to answer the question.
That's
so what?
exactly right.
So what?
Yeah.
Got the data, so what?
And I think the board and administration have to set a trajectory that we see evidence is moving that needle. And if it's not moving the needle, then we need to adjust. I wish it was a whole bunch easier than this. Gosh, I mean, my gig in higher ed is so much easier than this. It's so much easier.
So I want to ask a question, because I have an idea in my mind. One of the things that's creating this disconnect or gap, and one of that has to do with the demographics where we live. We don't have enough teachers and administrators that are role models. I remember I read an article about that recently that really resonated with me, and I passed it on to people. And I know they're way ahead of me on what they know, but I still send them articles. And so in my mind, I'm like, aha, that might help. And I know you're asking questions and collecting data that other schools districts maybe aren't. But are there some data comparisons that we could do? Because I have to believe that, say, I want to see what St. Louis's or Kansas City's statistics are around this, because I have to believe they have more black teachers, right? And that's helpful to kids. I want to know if any of the things that we're thinking of that could be helpful here, that could move this needle. I don't want to just like be spinning my wheels, and I want to look at some things and see what could really help, because we're not at a lack for our administrators or this board wanting to do. I would just like to have some idea what people think might be a good choice or has been successful somewhere else.
Well, I think that's kind of the next step is the analysis of internal best practices and external best practices, instead of driving to say, how many African-American teachers do you have, and saying, where is the performance different, right? And peer districts, peer buildings, and then going and investigating internally and externally to see where are those outlier moments, to say, is there a strategy that does connect to what an opportunity might exist for us? And so use this to shine a light on the gaps and the inequities, and then really dig deep into internal best practices and external best practices that drive at those places where it's not that way, right? And there are places where it's not that way, but it's not every place, right? As Bruce knows, I mean, this is not an easy solution, or we would have already fixed it, or every urban quasi-suburban district in the country would have already fixed it. These gaps have existed for decades in lots of different places and in SPS, and it's our job to eliminate them and strategically attack them, right? But we don't know what to attack until we know what the data says, and I think we're getting a more clear picture of not just what we thought, but what we know, and then that drives us to really investigating the best practices to move the needle.
Well, I have faith that you're going to do that. This
And
has
that's
been
what strategy
demoralizing, so I
1.1.4 is
want to know
about,
what we're
is
doing next.
really about research and develop and deploy those things that get at exactly what you just said.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that, in an age of fake news, getting data is the antidote, and we've got the antidote. I've heard a number of times about how if you're a member of an underrepresented group in Springfield, your public education opportunities are limited. And this data provides some support for that observation. And it takes guts for us to own that. We could say, especially the 8 white people sitting at this table, say, oh, well, that's just a perception. That's not real. We have facts. And so when we look at this edition of strategy 1.1.4, I trust the focus of the administration to work the strategic plan. I have full confidence in the administration, and if this gets in the strategic plan, I believe it's going to get worked. What I'm hoping for is high-level champions for it, and that I'm glad to hear, John, you say that we may need to go outside and for some help on how to achieve this in the right ways. We've gone outside this district and looked at models across the country for other things, and this is one that we need to work on. This is one that we're not going to just solve locally, because this is not a problem just in Springfield Public Schools. I don't feel bad about this. I feel good about this, is that we're finally putting some light on this. What I will feel bad about is if we look at this a year from now and the data hasn't moved. That's, what we're looking for is progress. Is that the so what that Jerry talks about is here's what. That a year from now we say, here's what. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
I think the data are not ends to themselves, they're means to an end.
Yeah.
They are means to an end to get more effective, more equitable, and frankly, to unleash the teacher Bruce talks about, who's really committed to teaching a kid to learn, giving him or her everything that he or she needs to do that in a more effective and equitable way. Because frankly, I'll bet on our teachers need it, if we just give them the resources and the guidance that we need.
Other questions from me?
I think we're
Appreciate your
spent.
time.
Thanks, Brent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to section 10, report from administration. Superintendent update.
And I'll move straight to, because you had lots of info of depth tonight, and I would just highlight, thanks to Dr. Range and to the team members that presented and all the people behind the scenes that helped deliver that work. And there are celebrations, there are things that are going on in each of those departments that that teacher does not have to worry about the mental health supports and some of those things, and the response time of police, because we have people taking care of those things. So thanks to those team members for all they've done, and the people they work with, and the teachers on, boots on the ground, and support staff that are making the start of school successful. That being said, there's room for improvement, and we are going to attack those opportunities. So legislative update, important to note that the governor was in town today to announce a special session where he is asking, or he is calling the legislature, Senate and House, back in to review 2 bills. It's limited in scope and it will run concurrent with the annual veto session. Senate Bill 894, response to education, STEM education, as well as computer science coursework. It's got a lot of different tentacles to it, but he had some concerns with its wording and how it was designed, and is asking the Senate to start that process. I think since it's a Senate bill, we'll start the Senate to begin that work, and had 2 senators in the room today already start that conversation with Senator Dixon and Senator Wasson, who will be back as part of that session. We'll be providing input on how to make that bill better, and something that the governor can support, as well as helps really talk about the workforce needs in the areas of STEM for Missouri. The other thing deals with treatment facilities and programming regarding drug courts, and that's another bill that it'll be limited to. So 1 education and 1 kind of social service and treatment bill. And that will start September 10th. So that's the legislative update. Don't forget that I will be sending out soon last year's legislative platform for you to begin to review, and October will begin the time when we really dive deep into that. So if you have anything that's on your mind that you want to put before us, be sending them my way, but I'll get you the draft in the next couple weeks so that you can begin to review. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll switch to the Board of Education discussion, and I will start by asking for an update from our friends Denise and Tim about the Community Task Force on Facilities.
I think I always start first. You want to go first?
Go first.
Thank you.
Ladies first.
Thank you. Well, it's hard work. Would you agree?
I agree.
It's very hard work, and I think our task force members they realize that it's very hard work, and I think some of them are appreciating the work we do because it is very hard work, and they're making some decisions and getting a little pushback from other folks on some of their decisions, but they feel like they have good information and coming up with some good ideas. As to Alina's question, that are they finished asking things for things? I don't think so, because the more they talk, the more they find other needs and things. They just want to fix everything. They want to fix everything, and so I think they realize there's an end to that. But it's interesting how as they add things to the dollar amount is just, and even someone commented on that. Wow, we're gonna keep on till we're gonna get that dollar way up there, even beyond what the last ask was. But anyway, so a lot of hard work, and they're still hard at it. We have a meeting Thursday night, and even another week or two. Another week? Yeah, but anyway,
Yeah.
Tim.
I want to thank the board for their support tonight in approving that money for additional study work that was requested by the task force. This is the commitment we made when we appointed that task force, is that if they needed additional information, that we would go get it. One of our challenges will be that I have as a liaison to the committee, and I'm sure Denise feels the same way, is that we want this task force to make sure that they don't recommend anything that we can't accept. And that we as a board can't accept, because they are doing a lot of work for us. They represent the community to us. And so our job as liaisons is to encourage them to think deeply, be wise, but that the recommendation ultimately that they make really needs to be something that we can accept if we want to if the board decides to take action. So we're trying to represent your interests in that way. Not so much that we steer things, but that we make sure that this process works.
I'm not sure you could tell those people what to do.
I think you're right.
I meet a few of them on the street, and they are so excited about this work. I think they agree it's hard, but I think they're really honored to be.
It's a sharp group to the person. It's really good team.
Well, thank you. That's great feedback. The next thing is upcoming meetings. So we'll be meeting again on September 18th. The MSBA 2018 Annual Conference is September 27th through the 30th.
Can I make a comment about that one?
And yeah, there was nothing on here that let me ask for other comments, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going rogue.
Only comment about the annual conference, which we'll be going to. One of the general sessions specifically deals with this equity issue that we're talking about tonight.
You mean the
Annual
September
conference,
27th?
27th,
Okay.
That's
Who's presenting?
dealing,
Sorry, I don't need to know.
That's okay.
We can
Somebody.
follow up.
Well, it'll be on our
But I'm
agenda.
just saying, and it specifically drills down Missouri's statistics
Oh,
and
great.
data with respect to mentoring, with respect to underutilized students and role models in the classroom, and the impact that has.
Great.
And so I just put a plug. It's,
Please bring
I think
back.
it'll be, I've seen it before, and it's kind of enlightening when you look at Missouri. And it didn't get down to the district, but that's available, but that's, addresses exactly the same thing that we talked about, or a lot of the same things we talked about.
That's good. Glad to hear that. Anyone else have a comment or? Remember, you can do plus deltas. And we are going to need to go into executive session. We will conduct an executive session following this meeting to discuss legal and real estate matters as provided in sections 610.021, subsections 1 and 2 of the revised statutes of Missouri. Do I have a motion?
You do.
Everybody already voted in the audience? Do I have a motion that we meet in executive session to discuss legal and real estate? So Alina gives me a motion, and do we have a second?
Second.
That's kind of.
Charles, and let's vote. And the audience again has voted. Thank you all for being here.